Thanks, Ben. I put my hand up to do this presentation today, not as an authority on dugongs, but as someone with an interest in learning what we know about them and what research has been done in the passage. I'd like to acknowledge Dr. Janet Lanlon and her team for the research I'll be summarising today, and Dr. Eva Palangi, who presented a public lecture on dugong in Moreton Bay as part of Moreton Bay Regional Council's Priority Species Project. Professor Helen Marsh for her ongoing research into dugongs, and Greg Savage for his local knowledge. So just a few dugong basics. They're marine mammals. They live up to about 70 years of age, if they're lucky. They can grow up to 3 metres in length and up to 500 kilograms. They first birth between 7 and 17 years. They have a single calf, 13-month gestation, and an birth interval of 3 to 7 years. So this slow breeding rate makes them particularly susceptible to factors that threaten their survival. They're herbivorous animals, feed almost exclusively on seagrass. They're cultivation grazers, which means they uproot the entire plant, and that aerates the sea floor, increases the organic matter and helps the seagrass to regenerate quickly. They're very selective in the seagrass species that they eat, with Halophora ovalis being one of their preferred species. It's fast growing, high in nitrogen and low in fibre. So their distribution is the northern area of coastal Australia, with Moreton Bay Marine Park being their southernmost extent of their residential breeding grounds. There's been a few sort of sporadic records and sightings of them down as far as southern New South Wales. But that's just in the warmer months, and we don't know why they travel down that far. They commonly are found in Moreton Bay in herds of about 100 animals, which makes them quite unique compared to other areas where they're just seen singularly or in pairs. They can travel large distances, all the way up to Hervey Bay, 200 kilometres north. So in the last census for Moreton Bay, there were approximately 600 dugongs counted, and this is thought to be a relatively stable population over the last 20 years or so. The Moreton Bay population of dugongs are the most studied, intensely studied group of dugongs in Australia. But what we've seen is an easterly contraction of that range, thought to be as a result of coastal development and boat strikes. The Pumicestone Passage is one of the few inshore areas that still support dolphins. Just a couple of pictures of a herd of dolphins in Moreton Bay, and there's lots of amazing pictures on social media. And this is actually a near map image. One of our GIS officers, you can clearly see a dugong off Bongaree. It's a little bit small for me to read, so I might use this. So they were first documented in written form by Matthew Flinders in 1799. The local dugong fishery operated sporadically out of Bribie Island between 1877 and the early 1900s. Anecdotal reports from local people suggested that the number of dugongs regularly using the Pumicestone Passage were significantly fewer in 2005 compared to 50 years earlier. Local residents also reported that small numbers of dolphins were using the passage year-round. And this is despite winter water temperatures dropping to levels that normally cause dolphins to migrate elsewhere. So this knowledge is what I suppose, inspired Janet Lanlin and her team to have a look at the distribution of and presence of dolphins in the Pumicestone Passage, and they published that work in 2005 in Wildlife Research. So what they did is examined 8 years of sightings collected by the Ferryman charter boat service, and they also conducted aerial surveys in the passage at 2 monthly intervals over 2 years and more intensively over a single winter. The sightings were examined in relation to water temperature and seagrass prevalence. And I believe Rob King provided all the water temperatures for the project. So what did they find? So the number of dugongs in any one survey varied between 0 and 13. And this is most likely to be an underestimate given the nature of the survey methods. You can only see dugongs at the surface, and they spend most of their time under the water. So dugongs were seen in all months of the year in each of the 8 winters, indicating their year-round presence, despite water temperatures dropping below 18 degrees. And in fact, that's 16 degrees in June. All dugongs sightings occurred in the southern part of the passage, south of Triplicany Bight. Dugongs were associated with the shallows that support Halophila and Halagule species of seagrass. So the northern part of the passage also supports these seagrass species, and it would probably be interesting, obviously this was from 2005, looking at the more recent monitoring that we just heard about. To see whether this has changed, but and also the water temperatures were similar in the Northern Passage. So what the authors concluded was that the absence of dugongs in the north was most probably sort of the shallow nature of the Northern Passage, and no deep water refugia for them. The other theory was perhaps just the fact they're accessing from Moreton Bay and getting waylaid by the seagrass beds along the way. I'll just go through quickly. This is a map showing the cumulative sightings from the 8 years of boat surveys, and the shaded areas indicate the seagrass beds. The dugong is listed as vulnerable under the Queensland Conservation Act and the Nature Conservation Act, and also under the IUCN Red List of threatened species, and it is listed as marine and migratory under the EPBC Act. So threats are listed in the Action Plan for Australian Mammals 2012, and I selected the ones most relevant to the Pumicestone Passage. Habitat degradation, including coastal development, pollution, vessel strike, anthropogenic noise and acoustic disturbance, climate variability and change. Also, we have Lingbeer blooms, which were discussed today, and this was something Greg Savage identified in his monthly monitoring, the potential impact that Lingbeer blooms have on smothering seagrass and the impact that will have on dugongs. And also an emerging threat is exposure of dugongs to terrestrial disease-causing pathogens from coastal pollution. And I'll just highlight a couple of the information needs on this slide. Survey to better define distribution. When I contacted Janet Lanlin, she confirmed that she hadn't done any further research since 2005, but that she does want to go back and identify whether the population of dugongs in the passage are a subgroup separate to the Moreton Bay dugongs, or whether they're part of that same population. So more work needs to be done there. And assessing impacts of threats on species. I think there's definitely more work to be done on the impact of Lingbeer on seagrass. Okay. Thank you, and I'll flick to the next one. Unfortunately, Nina Kaluza couldn't make this presentation on the Yurku or water mouse. And she sends her apologies, but she has asked me to present her findings over of 8 years of research on her behalf. Her research has contributed to Commonwealth Government's referral guideline 2015 and a review of the National Recovery Plan for this species. Nina and I would like to acknowledge the First Nations people of this sea and country on which we gather today and pay our respects to the past, present and emerging elders. Nina earned her master's degree on the conservation and ecology of Yurku by dedicating many years of investigating the watermouse behaviour in their natural environment. The exhausted survey effort located 442 nests in coastal wetlands between Yurrumbula National Park and the Pumicestone Passage to determine the species' nest structure and association with plant presence. The results confirm the primary factors that are contributing to this species' decline through poor adjacent land management and are documented within Nina's open access thesis. So a little about the Yurku. The watermouse is one of Australia's most enigmatic, intriguing and little known vertebrate species and are listed as vulnerable under the Commonwealth's EPBC Act and Queensland's Nature Conservation Act. The watermouse is recognised as being a single national important population with a patchy distribution along the southeast coast of Queensland to Northern Territory. The nocturnal watermouse builds mud structures, often in the form of mud mounds, and forages for invertebrates such as crabs, molluscs, flatworms in coastal habitats, primarily intertidal systems. Adverse effects to the watermouse's environment include habitat loss, degradation and fragmentation, changes to hydrology, acid sulfate contamination, introduced predators, and possible climate change. The nocturnal watermouse builds mud structures, often in the form of, Previous studies suggest the species breeds twice annually, giving birth to 1 to 3 offspring, and the individual lifespan is approximately 3 years. Other research has concluded the main threat to the watermouse is inappropriate management of adjacent land, leading to sediment or hydrology changes in the intertidal zone. These adverse effects to the watermouse must be avoided elsewhere in southeast Queensland, as local loss can progress to regional species extinction. So there's just a few slides that Nina's included here that shows various interactions from her camera trapping, interactions with other species, number of different birds interacting with the nests, and a couple of a possum that apparently was really scratching around for quite some time. There's the watermouse. So, studies over the last 30 years have shown the decline of suitable habitat and the direct impacts associated with human actions. Wetland areas such as the Pumicestone Passage and Moret are rapidly changing, and the key indicator species, such as the Yurku, will be another native rodent added to the extinct list before the end of the century. We must think about our actions, as prevention will always be better than cure. For this unique terrestrial rodent relying on coastal wetlands, what we do is significant. So there's a list of the adverse effects to the Yurku survival. Wildlife will prescribe burning adjacent to wetland systems. It's significant, and I'll show some pictures shortly. Introduced predators, adjacent land management and changes to wetland hydrology, and changes to mud quality within these systems alters mud building activity. And that's, a picture that's actually from the Great Sandy Strait, but showing prescribed burning in some ag land. And the bottom left is a water mouse mound that's been completely burnt as part of that prescribed burn. And just the heat of some of these burns and the impact it has on the water mouse diet. And fox predation. And also really an unknown is the impact of climate change on this species. So, in conclusion, the loss of one local mouse population along the Coomera River was documented in 2006 by Van Dyke et al. Within an area where urban and industrial development pressures are detrimental for this species and their associated habitat. If we are to understand the significant importance of our treasured waterways, we will need to look for the primary factors that assist in native species decline. When extensive research is implemented, the true value in coastal conservation will be realised. Thanks, Nina, for preparing that presentation. Any questions, Nina would be very happy to answer via email, and we'll have her details as part of conference proceedings.